So what Mastercard does is basically what we try to offer fintechs and startups the possibility to have the tools what they need to innovate. So the startups of the program are one and one in Romania. I mean, Startup Spotlight program already has a tradition in the Romanian ecosystem, and you can only expect that the startups that participate in Startup Spotlight would be the let's say creme de la creme that the Romanian ecosystem, but not even the Romanian ecosystem, the CE ecosystem can produce, because actually one of the startups that I discussed with was from Bulgaria. So I mean, it's already a regional, let's say, a regional way that which Startup Spotlight addresses the startups. I've had some very very good conversation with the ones that I have been, let's say, matchmake. I only had one session of matchmaking, so I discussed with about 5 startups so far, which were really interesting, and all of them very good ideas. All of them made sense from a business perspective. All of them, to a certain degree, I was able to help either with let's say with advice, or with connections or whatever. I still have one more session, I think, next week for a few startups, and I'm really looking forward to see what matchmaking I'm getting next week. So the pandemic actually had a very, of course, it had a lot of negative impacts across a lot of, let's say, a lot of dimensions of the economy. But from a digital perspective, I mean, the pandemic and startup perspective, I think, and especially tech startups, it had a very strong and positive impact, because it made the tech startups shine, right? So the tech startups had to evolve and had to push their sales even further in the last 6 months, so that they can reach their clients, either where they B2C or B2B2C or B2B, that doesn't matter. From our perspective, so from a payments perspective, I mean, Mastercard has seen double in share of e-com payments in the last 6 months. I mean, we're talking a lot of e-com payments, which is, let's call it a bit of a forceful education, because we've been making efforts like for a long time to try to get people to pay with their card, to pay with their card online or offline, to pay with their wallet. So for example, wallets, we had a growth, I think 145, 150% growth in transactions with wallets. So people are becoming much more aware of the fact that they have a card, that they can use it, that it's safe, it's secure. And I mean, it's skyrocketed in the last 6 months. Fintechs in general, so when you speak about fintech, you generally think about the large card issuing fintechs in Europe. So for example, when you say a fintech, you immediately think about Revolut, for example, which is, of course, it's a massive fintech, it's a unicorn. It's issuing in so many countries, and we're actually very proud that the first product that Revolut launched in Europe was a Mastercard product. So actually, out of the 30 most successful fintechs in Europe right now, 26 of those were launched with Mastercard. So we're very well, let's say, established in the fintech sector, in the issuing. But I need to raise the awareness that a fintech is not just the B2C issuing kind of business, but it's also a lot of the, let's say, companies and tech companies that are working in the background that consumers don't know about, and that basically make a lot of the things possible. Like, for example, one such fintech from the Romanian ecosystem is Finquare, which is actually doing an API that encompasses basically that allows banks to put into the market the account information functionality. So basically being able to see all the accounts from all your banks in one place. So firstly, we need to understand that fintechs can be a broad range of startups. Now, from our ecosystem point of view, I've noticed that in Startup Spotlight this year is actually quite the fintechs are quite missing, because I think we have that little downtrend where everyone was doing issuing and PSD2 came along, and then now we have this little kind of going down because people need to redress their ideas. They need to think about, okay, so what everyone's doing issuing, everyone's doing open banking. So what's the next thing that's going to go? So I'm expecting that this year we have, let's say, a low in fintechs, but I expect this to rise, especially that there's a lot of programs that are pushing fintechs to become better, they're pushing fintechs to actually open up their business, and I'm really looking forward to this. Payments have come a very long way. So I mean, payments initially, what a card payment was, I think in the 1950s, 60s, I can't remember exactly when it started, but the payment was basically an agreement between two people that I will pay you later, right? And they had a little card, and they said, this card gives me the right to tell you that I will pay you later. So this was like 60 years ago, right? It's not even that much. So payments have come a very, very long way, and in Romania, it's really, really nice to see that all the efforts that we've made in the last, let's say, 10 years, we see them now in how well the payments ecosystem is performing. Like, for example, in Romania, 9 out of 10 Mastercard transactions are contactless, right? Compare that to Europe, which is 75%. So we're already like one of the best performing in terms of contactless payments. We're one of the best performing in terms of payment technologies. Like we have, there's nothing in other parts of Europe that we do not have in Romania today in terms of let's say payment technologies, right? So the status quo. Now, in terms of innovation, I think there's two pillars here. There's one pillar is that all the big corporates that have the resources and the influence to push the payments industry forward need to do it. So, for example, what we do, so what Mastercard does is, one example is the open banking products that we offer, right? So when open banking came out of the as a directive, we already started working, saying, okay, we need to be there when open banking starts. So when open banking was published as a directive, we actually started building these products, which is basically three things that we do for any kind of financial company that wants to do open banking. We do an API that you can integrate from a lot of banks and basically being able to see your accounts from all banks. So it's a switch product, basically something that you can use. And we also try to do it. So the financial industry that are trying to do business through our APIs can adhere to our rules. So, for example, this is something very important, and I'm just going to sidestep here for a second. When a consumer is making a payment with a card, that payment is protected. So if that consumer is, let's say, unfortunately has a fraud issue, then what Mastercard does is that has rules in place to be able, if the fraud is confirmed, to send them back to the consumer so that everyone is okay. Now, when you do other kinds of payments, this is not necessarily the case. Those transactions are not protected. So when you send money account to account to someone, for example, and let's say that person is a fraudster, you are going to lose that money, and that's it. And it's unfortunate. So what we try to do with our products is basically we try to get people that are using open banking and will be using open banking as such to be protected by the same laws that we protect our current customers in card payments. So coming back to what I was saying, so we are trying to innovate and we're trying to put the tools in place for fintechs. But at the same time, fintechs need to know that we are trying to get everything, let's say, to make all the conditions that they need to innovate. And if they need anything, if they need acceleration, if they need investments, if they need tools or tech, we are there for them. So, for example, in the last, I think, 2 years, Mastercard has invested about 90 million euros or something like that in fintech programs, acceleration, investments, launch, and so on and so forth. So what we need is the corporate world or the big payment companies to be able to offer the support to the maybe more fast or more, let's say, agile small companies that can innovate quickly on a small subject and just get in increments and be able to innovate at the end with the entire path. Open banking, it's a very interesting topic in terms of a lot of people just look at open banking as, let's say, the business side. But open banking needs to, just to set the record straight, open banking is part of the PSD2 directive, so Payment Service Directive Act 2. Now, the Payment Service Directive Act 2 actually discusses a broad range of things that have been innovated in the financial sector. Open banking is one of them. So the business side of it is one of them. So basically being able to see all your accounts in one place, being able to make transactions from your phone through other accounts from other banks. So it's a lot of things that have been put in place, or the rules are in place, that basically made the financial industries a bit more of a democratic industry, if I can say that. And in Romania, there already have been some banks that have introduced the open banking. So, for example, Banca Transilvania and BCR and Libra Bank, these are banks that already started innovating using the open banking directive as a guideline. And right now, you can see, for example, I think in all of these banks, you can see some of the accounts from other banks that you may work with at the moment. Apart from open banking as let's say the commercial side, there's the security side. So PSD2 actually put forward some security, let's say, thresholds that you need to have in order to be able to compete in the financial industry, in the payment industry. And I think these are also very important because they're very resource costly. So our partners are now implementing, for example, 3DS 2.0, which is something that the consumer cannot see, because the consumer doesn't know whether the 3DS message is 1 or 2 or whatever, but it gives a lot more security to our clients, right? So Mastercard ID check and ID check mobile are two of the tools that we use to make those transactions much more safe. I think open banking is just starting in Romania. So some of the banks are innovating, all of the banks are doing security. And I think that next year and the year after will be like the peak at what will innovation be from open banking perspective.